There is a reason your heart became still before your eyes reached these words. Not because of chance, but because somewhere beyond everything you can already explain, a quiet conversation has finally reached the moment where it can no longer remain unspoken. The person you love has been carrying something that refused to fit inside ordinary silence. They tried to continue with familiar routines, smiled when others were watching, answered questions with simple words, yet every quiet moment kept leading them back to the same thought: you. Don't skip, because every sentence is gently bringing you closer to something that has been unfolding long before today. What happened was not loud enough for the world to notice, yet it changed something within them forever. It began with an ordinary moment that should have passed unnoticed. A familiar place, a familiar sound, a memory they believed had faded. Then, without warning, they realized that every path they imagined for tomorrow somehow carried your presence. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sudden. It was simply impossible to ignore anymore. For the first time, they stopped trying to explain away what their own heart had been whispering. They wanted to reach out immediately, but words felt too small for what they were experiencing. They started one message, erased it. They tried again, paused. They looked at the empty screen for a long time, wondering how anyone could describe a feeling that had quietly grown stronger while they weren't even paying attention. That unfinished message still carries the weight of everything they wished they could say in one breath. Something important is waiting for you, because this isn't only about what they discovered. It's about the unexpected reason they finally understood why every attempt to move forward without you kept feeling strangely incomplete. They have not found every answer yet, but one realization became impossible to deny: some connections become clearer only after enough silence has passed. And while they searched for the perfect words, another unexpected moment arrived, one they never anticipated, and it completely changed what they decided to do next. What happened next was so quiet that almost anyone else would have overlooked it, yet for the person you love, it became the moment everything finally connected. They weren't searching for a sign anymore. They had grown tired of wondering whether they should keep holding on to feelings that seemed impossible to explain. Then, in the middle of an ordinary day, something reminded them of a promise they had never spoken aloud. A familiar phrase, a forgotten melody. A place that suddenly felt alive with memories they thought time had erased. In that instant, they stopped running from what their own heart had been trying to tell them. Stay till the end, because the deeper truth is only beginning to reveal itself. They sat in silence longer than they had in weeks. No distractions. No noise. Just thoughts that refused to disappear. For the first time, they asked themselves an honest question. If this feeling has remained through every season, every distraction, and every attempt to move on, what is it trying to teach me? The answer did not arrive in words. It arrived as peace. A quiet certainty settled over them, and with it came the realization that some people leave an imprint on your life that cannot be measured by distance or time. That realization led them back to you in ways they never expected. They remembered little moments they had once dismissed as ordinary. A conversation that lingered in their thoughts. A smile that appeared without effort whenever your name crossed their mind. A kindness they had taken for granted until they imagined a future without it. Suddenly those small memories became more valuable than all the grand moments they had been chasing elsewhere. Don't skip, because this is where everything slowly began to change. Instead of asking whether they should speak, they started asking how they could express what had been hidden for so long. Every sentence they imagined felt incomplete. Every beginning seemed too small for what they truly wanted you to understand. Yet while they searched for the right words, something completely unexpected happened. Something they never planned for, something that made them stop in the middle of writing and quietly whisper, "Maybe this is the moment I've been waiting for all along." What they saw in the very next moment didn't answer every question, but it convinced them that keeping silent was no longer the path they wanted to follow. Before another thought could interrupt them, the person you love did something they had been avoiding for far too long. They closed every distraction around them and allowed the silence to speak louder than their doubts. It was in that gentle stillness that they finally admitted something they had never been brave enough to say, even to themselves. The feeling they carried was no longer a passing emotion. It had become part of the way they saw tomorrow, part of the way they imagined hope, and somehow, part of the way they understood themselves. Something important is waiting for you, because this realization opened a door they never expected to walk through. They reached for the message again, but this time they didn't begin by explaining anything. They simply stared at your name. Minutes passed without a single word being typed. It wasn't because they had nothing to say. It was because every sentence felt too small for everything their heart had been carrying. They wondered if you would understand the silence between the words better than the words themselves. They wondered if you had ever paused unexpectedly, feeling that someone, somewhere, was thinking about you with unusual sincerity. Then another memory quietly surfaced. They remembered a moment when you showed kindness without expecting anything in return. At the time, it seemed ordinary. Now it felt extraordinary. They realized that while many people had entered and left their life, very few had made them feel truly seen. You had done that without even trying. That understanding settled deeply within them, and it became impossible to ignore. Don't skip, because what happened after this was not dramatic, it was deeply personal. Instead of rushing to send the message, they made one unexpected decision. They wanted every word to carry honesty instead of emotion alone. They rewrote the message again and again, removing anything that sounded rushed, leaving only what genuinely reflected their heart. By the time they finished, they were no longer trying to impress you. They simply wanted you to know the truth they had hidden for far too long. Just as their finger moved closer to sending those carefully chosen words, something unexpected caught their attention. It wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't something they had planned. It gently interrupted the moment, leaving them with one final question: should they send the message immediately, or wait just a little longer because what they had just discovered could change the meaning of every single word? Just when they believed the hardest part was over, another quiet realization gently changed the direction of everything. It wasn't something another person said. It wasn't a message that suddenly appeared. It came from within. A moment of complete honesty that arrived without warning. They leaned back, closed their eyes, and asked themselves one simple question: if I let this opportunity pass, will I always wonder what could have been? The answer settled into their heart almost instantly, and from that moment, hesitation slowly began to lose its grip. Stay till the end, because the story is now moving toward the reason this message could no longer remain unwritten. They opened the message one more time, but this time they weren't trying to sound perfect. They weren't searching for impressive words or unforgettable phrases. Instead, they chose sincerity. They wanted every sentence to reflect the truth they had carried quietly for so long. As they read each line back to themselves, something unexpected happened. They realized the message wasn't only about telling you how they felt. It was also an apology for every moment they had allowed uncertainty to create unnecessary distance. The more they reflected, the clearer everything became. They remembered times when they almost reached out but convinced themselves it wasn't the right moment. They remembered believing that tomorrow would always offer another chance. Yet now they understood something that many people discover too late, that meaningful moments rarely announce themselves in advance. They arrive softly, asking only whether someone is willing to recognize them before they quietly pass by. Don't skip, because what happened next surprised even them. As they prepared to send the message, they noticed one small detail they had overlooked until now. It wasn't hidden in the words they had written. It was hidden in the reason they had waited so long. They realized they had never truly been afraid of your response. They had been afraid of how deeply your answer mattered to them. That single realization changed everything. The uncertainty they had carried for so long suddenly gave way to quiet courage. With a calm breath, they looked at the screen one final time. Their hands stopped for just a second, not because doubt had returned, but because another thought gently entered their heart. If they shared this message now, there would be no turning back. Everything that had remained unspoken would finally become real. And in the very next moment, something appeared that made them pause once again, something so unexpected that it completely changed the final words they were about to send. Without making a sound, the room seemed to grow quieter than before. It was almost as if time itself had slowed, giving the person you love one final opportunity to listen to the truth they had been trying to outrun. They lowered the phone for a moment, took a deep breath, and smiled. Not because every question had been answered, but because they finally understood that some answers only arrive after the heart becomes completely honest. Something important is waiting for you, because what happened next reshaped the message in a way they never expected. They erased the final sentence they had spent so much time perfecting. Then they erased another. Soon, only a few simple words remained. They realized they no longer wanted to hide behind carefully crafted phrases. If this message was ever going to reach you, it had to sound real. It had to carry the quiet weight of everything they had learned instead of the fear they had carried. For the first time, they stopped trying to control how the message would be received and focused only on making it true. As they looked through old memories, they noticed something that had always been there but had escaped their attention. Every meaningful turning point in their life seemed to carry a small reminder of you. Sometimes it was a conversation that returned unexpectedly. Sometimes it was a familiar place that brought back a feeling they couldn't explain. Sometimes it was simply the strange comfort of believing that no matter how much life changed, one thought had remained remarkably constant. That thought was your name. Don't skip, because this quiet discovery became the reason they could no longer pretend everything was ordinary. They began to understand that what they had been searching for wasn't a perfect moment, it was the courage to stop hiding behind perfect timing. They whispered to themselves, "Maybe I've been waiting for certainty when all I ever needed was honesty." Those words stayed with them, growing stronger with every passing second. Then, just as they were ready to press send, the screen lit up unexpectedly. It wasn't the message they expected. It wasn't even from the person they thought would interrupt this moment. Yet what appeared before their eyes carried a simple reminder that felt impossible to ignore. They stared at it in complete silence, and a gentle smile returned to their face because they suddenly knew exactly how this message had to begin. The first words they chose were unlike anything they had written before. And once you hear them, you'll understand why they believed this was the moment that could quietly change everything. A single sentence changed the entire direction of the message before it was ever sent. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. Yet the moment those words appeared on the screen, everything else suddenly made sense. The person you love looked at them for several quiet seconds, almost surprised that the simplest truth had been the hardest one to discover. Stay till the end, because what those words awakened inside them is something they never expected to feel again. Instead of speaking about the past, they chose to begin with the present. They wanted you to know that this wasn't a message born from loneliness or passing emotion. It came from clarity. They had spent enough time questioning themselves, enough time convincing their heart to stay silent, and enough time believing that waiting would somehow make the feelings disappear. It never happened. If anything, the silence only made the truth easier to recognize. As that realization settled within them, they found themselves remembering details they had overlooked for so long. The calm they felt whenever they imagined your happiness. The quiet gratitude that appeared whenever your name crossed their mind. The strange comfort of believing that, even during life's busiest seasons, some connections never truly lose their place. Those memories no longer felt random. They felt connected, like pieces of a picture that had finally come together. Don't skip, because the next decision surprised even them. Rather than sending the message immediately, they read it one final time, not to change the words, but to ask themselves whether every line carried kindness, honesty, and hope. If even one sentence felt uncertain, they wanted to replace it with something gentler. They realized that meaningful words should never rush ahead of a sincere heart. Then something unexpected happened. Their attention drifted to the very first draft they had written days earlier. They almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity made them pause. As they compared it with the message now waiting to be sent, they noticed a remarkable difference. The first draft was filled with questions. The new one was filled with quiet confidence. Somewhere along this journey, they had stopped searching for reassurance and started speaking from the truth they had finally accepted. Just before they reached the send button once again, one final memory quietly returned, one they hadn't thought about in a very long time. It wasn't the biggest memory they shared with you, but it became the one that convinced them this message could no longer remain unfinished. And what that memory revealed would shape every word that comes next. Long before they reached for the send button again, a forgotten memory quietly found its way back. It wasn't the kind of memory people usually tell stories about. There were no grand gestures, no extraordinary moments, nothing the world would have paused to admire. Yet somehow, this small and ordinary moment carried more meaning than anything else. The person you love realized that the memories which stay with us the longest are often the ones we almost overlooked while they were happening. Something important is waiting for you, because this memory became the final piece they didn't know they were missing. They remembered the way you once made an ordinary day feel lighter without even trying. A few simple words. A shared laugh. A moment of quiet understanding that asked for nothing in return. At the time, they accepted it as just another passing experience. But now, looking back with a different heart, they understood that some moments quietly become anchors. They remain with us, patiently waiting until we're finally ready to recognize their true value. That realization brought an unexpected peace. For the first time in a long while, they stopped wondering whether the timing had been perfect. They stopped asking whether every circumstance had lined up exactly as planned. Instead, they understood something far more comforting: meaningful connections are not measured by perfect timing. They are measured by the honesty that survives every season of waiting. Don't skip, because this is where their thoughts turned completely toward you. They imagined what you might be doing at this very moment. They wondered if life had become busier than either of you expected. They wondered if, somewhere deep inside your own quiet moments, there had ever been a brief pause that seemed impossible to explain. Not because you were searching for answers, but because your heart had gently remembered someone without knowing why. As these thoughts settled within them, they looked at the message one final time. It no longer felt like a confession. It felt like an invitation to leave behind assumptions, silence, and everything that had remained unfinished. They smiled softly, realizing that whatever happened next, they would never again have to wonder what honesty might have changed. Just as they gathered the courage to let their words finally reach you, another quiet surprise unfolded. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't interruption. It was a simple discovery hidden in plain sight all along, a discovery so personal that it made them whisper, "Now I finally understand why this message couldn't have been sent any sooner." And the meaning behind those whispered words is about to reveal something they never imagined you needed to hear as much as they needed to say it. What they uncovered wasn't hidden in a message, a photograph, or an old conversation. It had been quietly resting inside them all along, waiting for the right moment to be understood. The person you love suddenly realized that every time they tried to silence their thoughts, one feeling always remained. It was calm. It was steady. And no matter how many distractions life placed in front of them, it always found its way back to you. Stay till the end, because this gentle realization changed not only what they wanted to say, but why they needed to say it. For a long while, they believed they were waiting for the perfect opportunity. Now they understood that the opportunity had been there all along. What was missing wasn't the right day. It was the courage to trust what their heart had quietly known. They smiled to themselves, almost amazed that clarity could arrive so softly. There was no rush, no overwhelming emotion. Just a quiet confidence that this message deserved to be shared, not because everything was certain, but because honesty had become more important than hesitation. As they reflected on the journey that had brought them here, they noticed how much they had changed. They no longer measured connection by how often two people spoke. They measured it by the peace they felt whenever they thought of someone. And every time your name entered their mind, that same peaceful certainty returned. It wasn't loud enough for the world to notice, but it was strong enough to reshape the future they had been imagining. Don't skip, because something important is waiting for you. They began reading through the message one last time, not searching for mistakes, but searching for one thing, whether every word carried hope instead of regret. They wanted the message to leave you with warmth, not questions. They wanted you to feel understood, not overwhelmed. In that quiet moment, they realized the most meaningful conversations don't begin with perfect sentences. They begin with genuine hearts. Then, just before everything was about to move forward, they noticed something they hadn't expected. It wasn't written on the screen. It wasn't spoken by anyone around them. It was the date. They looked at it for a long moment, and suddenly remembered why this particular day had always felt different. A memory connected to this date returned with surprising clarity, bringing with it a promise they had once made in silence, a promise they had almost forgotten until now. They gently closed their eyes, holding that memory close, because they knew the next words they were about to send would carry the meaning of that forgotten promise. And once those words leave their heart, nothing between you and them will feel quite the same again.